Okay. Okay, are all the panelists ready? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, thank you for joining us. I hope you've been able to watch the Move Talk Pride film, and happy National Coming Out Day. I'm very pleased to be sharing it with you all. I'm Esther, she, her. I'm the programme administrator at DanceEast, and I was also a participant in Move Talk Pride, as you may have seen. For audio description, I'm a white woman with short hair and glasses. Today I've got a white t-shirt and some black dungarees on, and I've got a plain white background. I need to get some paintings up in my new house or something. So joining us on our panel, we have 3 of the other participants and more people that are involved in the project. So we'll go around the room. Perhaps we can all nominate someone to go next. Ellis, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Ellis. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a professional dancer and I took part in the Move Talk Pride project. And for audio description, I'm a small 26-year-old white girl wearing a bright yellow jumper and sitting in my home office.
Wonderful. Rosie, would you like to go next?
Hi there, I'm Rosie and I'm a filmmaker and editor. My pronouns are she, her, and for audio description, I am a white woman with a bleached blonde mullet. I'm wearing a yellow beanie, a bright pink jumper and glasses.
Nick, would you like to go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Nick. I am 63 and I am wearing an old Gits cap, I suppose, and a pair of glasses, brown glasses, and a warm neutral top. A bit boring really, but I'm cold, so, and I'm sitting in my armchair at home in front of the white curtains. Yeah.
Andy, would you like to go next?
Yes, hi, I'm Mandy. I suppose ostensibly I'm a white male. If people are searching for pronouns for me, then he, him, I'm happy with that. I'm sort of slightly fading red hair with highlights that come with age rather than out of a bottle or any salon or intention. And I'm wearing glasses. I'm wearing some green, as I often do, autumnal colours on me. I'm in the autumn, I suppose. And I'm sitting behind a white background, which is very disconcerting.
Mandy, would you like to go next?
Hi everyone, I'm Mandy Rawlings. I am Community and Learning Officer at Suffolk Archives at the Hold in Ipswich. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white, middle-aged, mature woman with brown shoulder-length hair. I'm wearing a yellow sweatshirt, and behind me I have shelves with too many history books on.
And lastly, Stuart.
Hi, I'm Stuart, 43-year-old white male, pronouns he, him, they. I'm in a Premier Inn, which means I've got a, a white background with the odd mild purple curtains that you have to the right of me, a blue shirt and a white t-shirt with 1977 on, and a faded skin fade.
Wonderful. So if any of our audience have any questions, please put them in the Q&A button and we'll try to get round to them. But first of all, shall we chat a little bit about the project, where it came from and the process we went through? Is there anyone that would like to begin?
you like me to start where the project came from?
That'd be good.
So as I said earlier, I work for Suffolk Archives, and we have a new building on the Ipswich waterfront called The Hold. And some of the community work that we've been doing started with a Pride in Suffolk's Past project, which is a community research project where we were supporting people to delve into our archives and discover some hidden histories from the LGBTQ+ community in Suffolk. In addition to that, it became apparent that we also needed to collect people's lived experiences of now and put those into the archives as well. And in addition, we wanted people to engage with the stories from the past and the present and really interpret them in a creative way that would maybe entice other people to engage with diverse stories and experiences who may not have previously wanted to do it in that type of way. So engaging with local heritage, but also accepting that it can be interpreted in new and interesting ways, such as dance and movement.
Wonderful. Has anyone else got anything they'd like to say about the process? With Stuart or Rosie, would you like to say anything about how you guided us through the creative process?
I wonder whether if you want to, Stu, whether you wanted to do the initial beginning. I came in sort of afterwards, didn't I? Yeah, sure.
Well, when DanceEast approached me about this exhibition and about the idea of doing this through Zoom, because I'm struggling to remember at what point of what and which lockdown we might have been in when this conversation began, which I think also influenced the process. So there's some, I think there has been some good results of COVID, which is one of these. And I'd done a similar process with a dance company based at DanceEast. And interestingly, me and Rosie have worked together quite a lot on our own evolving series of stories, and marginalized voices really is the core to that project. But this seemed like a good idea to, this felt like that we'd already had an existing practice that would work quite well via Zoom with the participants on the screens to work with their voices, with their stories. And a great way to just use conversation as the starting point, holding safeguarding practice on Zoom, holding space, and just beginning to encourage and find a way to build trust and rapport, I suppose, through the screen, to then think about their individual queer stories in the past and present in order to run along and align with the exhibition. So that was really the starting point for us. Yeah, Rosie?
Yep, and I think what was really interesting was in the moment where I came in, I think you'd done a few workshops, and I guess when I came in, my emphasis was obviously I was going to be editing it, whereas usually I would also be in some scenarios filming as well. I think by this being initially all of it was all online, what was really great was that all of the participants had their own control over what they filmed, how they filmed it, what they said, the stories that they told. And I really hope that within that there was sort of, like Stuart was saying, creating like a safe space and a way that you can explore your past and your present and even the future. And so, yeah, so we kind of got together early on, and I expressed that I wanted you just to have fun, try different things out, make mistakes filming, explore that element to it as much as the movement. And then, yeah, later on, we then got sort of feedback from the final edits. But yeah, initially, I think it was a great way of starting and giving you ownership right from day dot.
Wonderful. Any of the participants, do you have anything you'd like to add, perhaps about your own creative process or what it was like filming your work, which for me, that was something, yeah, filming stuff myself was something I'd done for the first time. I think when I filmed my garden bit, I was still staying with my parents, and my dad was actually in the shot at the end. It's really cropped out. Yeah, does anyone else want to say anything about their process? Fine, if not. Oh, Andy does. Go on, Andy.
I was intrigued. This why the project's partly spoke to me was that I've been thinking about this a year or so for sort of another project, and thinking about my sort of own narrative and life more generally, and I think that's why it did sort of come to it. I mean, as I got into it, it seemed to expand, and never the time to do what you want to do. But sort of that was interesting. It was something that I'm quite intrigued, and maybe it's something for later, about sort of whether, when Stuart, you were sort of working with us in terms of tasks, and whether you were giving different tasks, you know, sort of, and flagging that up as a question for later. Be intrigued that, and also in terms of the process, intrigued by sort of Rosie's brief as editor in that role.
Nick or Ellis, is there anything you'd like to add?
I had a little bit of a mini breakdown when I was filming it, just because I was sort of started overanalyzing what I was doing, and I was like, no one cares. My story's not interesting. Why am I doing this? And then sort of Chrissy, bless her, had to talk me back into it, and realized that wasn't the point. Wasn't to make anything, you know, extraordinary. It was just to document real life. And I think once I kind of got that into my head, it became much more enjoyable and less about trying to make it perfect.
Yeah, I think I had a similar thing, Ellis. I think especially when we were coming out of lockdown as well, trying to be creative, especially with like deadlines and a time frame. I found that quite a thing to adjust back into. We've had such like a long time of perhaps taking a break from that kind of thing. So for me, I had a similar thing where I was just like, what am I doing? But yeah, it was good. And I think, yeah, for me personally, I found it the whole process very like therapeutic. I think coming back to Suffolk and exploring my journey in like the place I grew up in as well, like walking around the areas that I grew up in, I found it very like yeah, cathartic, and getting it all out of my system felt really good. Nick, is there anything you'd like to say about your process? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it does seem quite a long time ago, but so I should tell people I'm not a trained dancer at all. I did belong to a community dance company for older people, some trained and not trained, in London, but then I moved back to Suffolk. I'm originally from Norfolk, but I did live in Suffolk about 40 years ago. Yeah, I saw it, and I think it was really great actually to do something out of my comfort zone again. And I'm very interested, I write, so I was very interested in doing something which involved movement, and perhaps what Stuart did in the process was provoke us by getting us to think of words or I don't know, sound bites of music that resonated from our stories, our narratives. And you know, it really chucked up tons of stuff from my past. I'm so bloody old, I'm like a dinosaur. But you know, it did bring back a lot of memories. And like I said in my film, you do carry it all with you subconsciously. And you know, it was, I think well, I don't know about therapeutic. It was a good thing to just delve a bit in my life and look at what's made me who I am now, and try and share that with other people, other queer people, because I think that's important. And also, what I also enjoyed was listening to other people's stories, especially younger people, as I said. But it's just interesting because we're all the same and we're all different. and we're all queer. So there are some commonalities and there are also some big differences. And so I think having an opportunity to work with that in this sort of project, it was great actually. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. I found a new feature on my crappy phone, which is that slow motion thing, which I love. It's better if it's done in slow motion. You don't want to see me dance in real time. Not like that.
Well, that leads in very nicely to our next question, Nick. So yeah, it's something that came up in our group discussion. I think we had a little watch party watched the final film, was how it brought together different generations. Does anyone want to chat more about that? And perhaps, yeah, I think we spoke about the value in sharing history and experiences with younger generations of the queer community. Does anyone want to say anything more? Andy?
Yeah, I think, and equally very much so interesting for me to hear of younger generations' experiences now and how things are. And of course, that was the archive looking at past, current, but also, sort of that current being sort of the recent current, the past current. It's really good to have that captured to give people context of where things were from, where things are now, where the difference of 10 years, the difference of 5 years. So that was good. I mean, one thing on the intergenerational was hearing about sort of Ellis's point about constantly coming out, and it's something I really remember. And I'm wondering about this because I don't feel I'm doing it now. And why is that? Am I not having new experiences and new places to go to? I think I am, but something has changed. But it's interesting, Ellis, maybe people don't ask me, they think I'm past anything like that. So, maybe, but that was a very interesting point. So good, it's really good to hear those different stories. And it's one thing, coming to Suffolk later in life and compared to those coming back to Suffolk after a gap, and the ease that I've had coming at the time of life that I did compared to those who perhaps remember a time growing up which is maybe very different. So I'm mindful of that, and it was good to hear that.
I think it's nice to have men and women, young and old. So it's young and older, because it reminded me as well. Like when I was young, when I went to London, for example, that was a time when because there was a lot of segregation by gender, and but there was also a lot of coming together for the AIDS crisis, but across men and women. I don't know, in terms of activism, they were quite interesting times. And so it's what Alice was saying about constantly coming out. Yeah, I think particularly when you're younger, you're trying to make your way through life, to find the sort of role that you sit in. And one of the things people do ask is, how are you married? Do you have any children? And I remember I used to get that all the time, because I don't think people perceive that I look particularly gay. I mean, I could look gay, but I didn't, and the sort of job I did, people didn't necessarily have that expectation. So I understand where you come from, but also particularly as well, like when you come up against like health services and things like that. And when I came back up here, the GP I registered with, they made an assumption about me, my wife. I said, no, my husband. But they were fine about it. A bit like Andy said, I was waiting for it, remembering what it was like before when I lived in Leicester, which was terrible. Can't imagine that transposed to now, because things have moved on positively. But I just think that any opportunity to do something creative, to learn about each other, it's great. I'd like to get into a space and do more with words and dance and film and all of that, and listen to each other and talk and move together. I really love that, and bring some more people in, or take it out, some villages. I mean, what must it be like living in a village? I mean, I don't know if you're really young. How do young people socialize? Because there's it, you know, I don't pandemic accepting, you know.
I mean, it was really one.
Stuart's frozen.
I think I seem to remember encouraging timeline, a timeline, and thinking about what your queer timeline looked. And it was just interesting to see people's choices of which dates where and what those queer landmarks might have been, and the similarities between them. And growing up in Devon and being a rural person myself, I did grow up in a village. So I felt like there was a real common thread between this idea of the big lights and the big city offering more, but this sort of everyone's hearts seemed very set in Suffolk. And I really enjoyed listening to people with this idea, you know, coming back and then finding that sort of love romance with Suffolk. And that was something that I noticed from everybody, actually, that there was a real desire and love for Suffolk and for a warmer queer community, a larger queer community, which seems to be growing. But then on the flip side, I guess we still have the echoes of internalized homophobia, which seem current in different ways, and metaphorically as well as explicitly. So I enjoyed that as well.
It was quite interesting. I think you did a session at the beginning, Mandy, or Chrissy, is it? So there was a session that the archive did about people that we think could have been queer, or we know that were queer, that we didn't know about. So not just the obvious ones like Benjamin Britten and Peter Pears, but women, and also people of a lower class, you know, just ordinary working people. And that was really interesting. So nice images and things. Nice to see that, you know, like queer people living together, making a home together, making a life together, which quite often has just been so airbrushed out. I mean, you know, as people have said, you know, well, Stuart, like, you know, when you grow up in a rural place, particularly, you don't have any role models. And I guess now it's different, but maybe it isn't, because quite often I think celebrity is the thing at the moment. Across the board, straight, gay, queer, whatever, you know, everyone wants to follow this celebrity kind of thing, but the majority aren't celebrity. We're just living our lives as best we can, trying to enjoy it and get on with it. But I don't know.
I think that's something as well that shows like the progression. Of course, we're in Pride of Suffolk's past, like a lot of it from quite a long time ago. But you know, now we're in a position where we can share our stories, and you know, people in the exhibition couldn't, and they had to be uncovered. But like projects like this is like a hot kind of a moment of like, look how far we've come. We're in a position where we can. Mandy, is there anything you'd like to add about sort of generation and perhaps like oral history as well?
Well, there's a couple of things really after watching the film back again is, for example, Ellis mentioned, you know, I struggled with the fact that I wanted to make perfection, but then just did, you know, my ordinary life. Do you know what? It was phenomenal. The whole film was phenomenal. And do you know what? When what you have created is an archive in itself, which will go into the collections that people in the future will be able to look back and see. And they will understand those, as you say, ordinary lives were not ordinary. Everybody's life is extraordinary. And the film has really shown that. And again, I think I also want to mirror what Stuart's saying about the love of Suffolk does come through. There may have been times of turbulence maybe early on, but everybody seems to come back. I don't think that's a queer experience. I think it happens to straight people as well. There is a love for the county and it does draw people back. I don't know if it's the coast or the countryside or what it is, but something does drag us all back. But I'm glad that you enjoyed some understanding some of the stories that we had discovered from the archives, that it was a hidden history that we were trying to uncover. We didn't even know what was in there. It wasn't until we started looking that we discovered just ordinary people's lives, living together, in a time which is very, very different to what we're experiencing now. And it's really lovely that you've managed to reflect on those experiences, but also on your own experience. And it's been valuable that you've shared those experiences through this medium, because it is, like I said, just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Well done, all of you.
Mandy, I love the idea that was it volunteers who said, well, we've got loads of stuff, but it's just not indexed.
No, actually, it was a little bit different. It was like, no, there's not really anything in there. That's what I was told to start with. Yeah, you won't find anything, and because it's not catalogued, and people. So obviously, when an archive is catalogued, somebody reads it and is portraying what they think the value of that document is, and when that is documented 100 years ago, you know, they may not have even occurred to them that there was a relationship in those notes and those papers and those diaries and letters. It wouldn't have meant anything, so there was no recognition. So it's only when you go back with new eyes that you start to uncover the stories and the experiences of the past. And that is the fundamental thing about talking about identity. If you won't identify unless there's an identity to identify with. Yes. And so, you know, this goes in record management to life. God.
Maybe now's a good time to move on to our question about the impact of projects and exhibitions like Pride in Suffolk's Past. I think perhaps both personally for individuals, but also socially and culturally for local queer communities. Would anyone like to start with that? It feels like a big question, sorry.
I'll just start. It's just a thought, really. I mean, I enjoyed the small collection of participants that came forwards to join the project, just because I think it's good to hear as many variations of, you know, a marginalized part of the community historically, some more nuanced and the details about people's lives, so that we move further and further away from stereotypes. I think that's one reason to do it. But I also think this, you know, I also think the other reason to do it is I still think there's a lot more room for even more development. And I think that's why it's good that there are more opportunities. You know, I'm interested about all the other faces that aren't in the room and other parts of the queer community that haven't managed to be represented this time. That doesn't mean that they're not welcome, but I think that's another sign of where we might be in terms of queer activism right now, in terms of maybe being in a rural community with all the different nuances to identity around gender and race as well. So I think there's a lot further to go. So, and I think art works really well as a bridge between, between art and change and communities. And I think that's something that dance particularly does well. And I just think there needs to be more of it. There just needs to be more art, more presence. So that's what I thought was really interesting about all of that, you know, who came forward, why they may have come forward. So I think it's risen really important questions as well about stuff as well. So I just wanted to say that to start with.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like projects like this and Pride in Suffolk's Past, I think, yeah, and I think with things like Pride as well, there's always like a snowball effect when, you know, some people stand up and shout louder if someone else hears it, and you know, it keeps going. I think me and my friends have been talking about how the queer community and the scene in Suffolk and Ipswich at the moment, it feels like it's a real moment, and like it's something great is about to happen, and all of these projects and all of the things like this are really important in that. I think it's really exciting.
I I think it's happened at a really good time for Suffolk, a project like this, and a collaboration with Mandy for DanceEast and Suffolk and Pride, and it's just starting to make all those micro connections happen. It makes me get quite excited, even if I'm in the premiere. I'm getting quite excited just the thought of that. I just like to see connections happening, and I think that's what art does.
Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting thing about the Suffolk queer community in particular, because there's so many pockets of queerness in lots of little villages and everything's quite rural. I mean, there's Ipswich and other bigger towns, but it's finding that community and bringing it together is quite a hard thing to do. But yeah, it feels like it's happening now, which is great. Would anyone else like to add anything about the impact of these projects? Go on.
I feel like I never would have had the courage to come out had I not have seen, other people's example. And I was, always, Nick was saying about sort of celebrity culture, and it really was like seeing people that had come from similar backgrounds and still managed to be, I don't know, kind of celebrated and still be a success, that made me feel that it would be okay to do that too. And even if that's you can replace celebrity with, the local crazy cat lesbian that lives down the road, but just seeing that is my life aspiration. But just seeing other people lead by example is so important. And I think you hear a lot of straight cis people complain that there's too much queer representation in the media nowadays, and I don't think there can ever be too much, because there's so many young queer people out there that need that representation to show them that it's okay. Like there can't be too much. And yeah, to make a little tiny project that might one day be viewed by other people just feels like doing my own little bit to pay it forward. It's nice.
Andy, did you want to add something?
No, I just noticed the question from our attendee, so I just wondered whether, do you want to do those later or...
Yeah, I think we might have time for one more of our questions, and then we can answer the one in the chat. So what was the importance of using movement and film in the participants' explorations of their queer journeys and lives? I feel like we might have touched on this earlier when we were talking about the process. But yeah, maybe Rosie, this might be one you have some thoughts on. Sorry, I put you on the spot.
No, it's absolutely fine. I think there's something with the use of film and movement, and also sort of the narration that the participants did as well. I think there's something really accessible about it, and being able to reach a lot more people than if it was to be like a one night thing or something that was happening, live somewhere. I also think that it then also leaves it up to interpretation as well. I think we all watch things online, or we watch things on Netflix or whatever, and we all have shared experiences of that, but also we're able to interpret different narratives, our own, and apply our own narratives onto those as well. And I think I'd hope that all of you that took part, it felt like a safe thing to do. And I think for me as well, it was an absolute privilege to be given sort of all of that being handed over to me, and choosing maybe some stuff that I thought should go in, or taking some things out, and trying to elevate your voices as much as possible. And I think through the use of movement as well, what was really interesting is obviously I didn't know any of you, and to sort of have we had an audio file where you were answering questions, and then we had the movement files and the film files, and yeah, through the use of movement, how that was then able to elevate things that you were saying. was quite an interesting way of editing and trying to work out whether, you know, was the screen busy, were we using energetic movement versus maybe just holding that space a bit and letting the words speak for themselves, as it were. But yeah, no, I think movement is a really good way of expressing, and yeah, I think it's, yeah, hopefully an accessible thing for everyone as well.
Yeah. I mean, I also just think dance is wonderful for allowing imagery to land in the viewer's eye, and that really leaves a lot. I think dance is really good at leaving a lot of space for mirroring, and I think mirroring is really important in terms of people being able to have an image land with what they're looking at, and maybe mirror some of their own life experiences into that. And I think that's where potentially change can happen on fresh perspectives in that really. Yeah, I just wanted to add that because I just thought that's really interesting, because dance allows people to stay quite private as well when they were making it. Like, we were really thinking about how can these guys talk about themselves in a private and safe way and be as explicit as they want, but at the same time maybe talk about something through the use of metaphor or imagery. So that's why we use lots of different spaces around Suffolk as a choice, or your house or your garden or landmarks in Suffolk. And I think there is important place next to their individual stories as Suffolk's story, if you see what I mean.
Andy, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, thanks, Esther, on movement. I mean, it did sort of make me reflect how in my life and sort of my queer journey in my life, how for someone who never danced in childhood or early adulthood apart from socially, that sort of it almost how movement has become more and more important in my life went with coming out, went with developing myself, finding my own identity. And so it sort of walks in, moves in step with that whole aspect of my queer journey, my life. It's as that's expanded, I've been able to work out and suss out and find myself more. So yeah, it's totally walks with it. Well, hopefully not walks, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I found that using film, and especially filming it ourselves when there's not like people around you filming you or like listening to yourself record the audio, it definitely made me a lot more open. Like in the videos, most of it is me dancing in my pajamas in my parents' kitchen, but it also with the audio as well. I think it, and the space that Stuart created, make it, and with everyone, made it feel so safe. It was in, and still in lockdown, we were in this little bubble of safety and sharing, and it felt really lovely. So then, yeah, when you watch it, it's like, oh, other people are watching it, they're watching this as well. But no, it felt really good. It felt good to be that honest and vulnerable in such a like secure way. Yeah, and for movement as well, for me, that's, well, one of the first times I've moved probably in about a good 12 months over lockdown. So yeah, but it was great, like Andy was saying, to yeah, have that journey and explore it in a different have our queer journeys and explore it in a physical way as well. It felt good. Yeah.
I think sort of going on that as well, I think what was really nice for me was to be watching all of you moving so confidently, and a lot of the times sort of celebrating yourselves and, you know, dancing like no one was watching, or being hopefully just feeling yourselves on camera came across really strongly when I had just the raw files looking at them, and I think you all aced that in terms of like really, you know, going with it, really putting yourselves out there, and allowing yourselves just to, you know, celebrate yourselves and queerness, as much as also us talking and you talking about things that may have been difficult or part of your journey. It was just really nice to have that juxtaposition of you know, those kind of moments versus dancing in your parents' kitchen. 100%. It was really a pleasure to watch.
Does anyone want to add anything to that before we move on to the question in the Q&A? No. Okay. So we've been asked, would you like to see this project continued next year with new participants?
In short, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I can't stop talking. I think it's I think we touched on it, haven't we? That there's a lot more stories to be heard and variations of the now as well. And I think that's, you know, you can keep generating those archives and those different details, and just keep that going, because I just think it's wonderful, you know, especially we have to start reframing it all, the historically as a queer person, so to, you know, keep celebrating it.
Definitely, 100%. And we've touched this evening about the voices and the stories that aren't in the room, and we're 4 people of however many hundreds, thousands of queer people that there are in Suffolk, and have lived in Suffolk. So can only grow. Yeah. Anyone else like to add anything? Oh, another question we've got. Could you see it evolving into a live performance? Lots of nodding. Oh, brilliant.
Well, yes, I mean, my imagination could go on, but wouldn't it be wonderful to see lots of queer people using their bodies somewhere in Suffolk doing something outdoor? Yeah, why not?
Why not?
There's also things like you know, the Doc Fest here in Aldeburgh. I don't think I've ever seen anything queer or vaguely from the grassroots up from Suffolk. And they showed Aikenfield, which is really interesting, and somebody talked about Aikenfield, which is great, but nothing really contemporary, nothing quite eclectic within the queerer spaces of Suffolk. That might be interesting to present to perhaps a more traditional audience. Albany is shaking up. Albany needs a good shake up, but yeah, I think it's interesting. I also think that you know, there's potential to link up across different communities across the country. So like, we've got this little film here, can't that be shared with, for example, I know the London Metropolitan Archive, they've got a queer history club, and there's a fantastic queer archive at the Bishopsgate Institute. I don't know if you know Steph Vickers, who does that, curates that, but you know, there's an awful lot of possibility to share even what we've done with other communities, to provoke dialogue and conversation, and maybe stimulate them into doing something similar in their communities, and to promote Suffolk as well. I like the idea of meeting people. It was great to do this. I mean, it was like a relief. I thought, oh, you know, I'm trying to keep sane in this horrible time, and I'm doing quite a lot of creative stuff, but all on my own. So it was so nice to come together. And like Esther said, it felt very safe, and it seemed to be over in a flash, really. But look what we've done, and then just seeing it again now, a bit of it before we had to come back, it's pretty cool. I thought it's amazing, you know, what little time we had together with Stuart and with Rosie, what the outcome is. I think it's really nice, and it presumably didn't cost a lot, did it? I mean, not a huge amount. I don't know what they paid you, but I mean, But it shows what you can do on very little, because if it's facilitated in the right way, people do it. We all went away and owned it in our own little way, in our own spaces, and then we all came together again. So I think the whole process is a very nice one that we should try and, or should be trying. We all, everywhere, people should be trying to do these sorts of things, because it's just really nice way of talking to each other.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think like a live opportunity also encourages queer families and non-queer families, and just integration. Basically, I think that's what performance will do. It sort of brings people together, doesn't it, in a, you know, not just an exclusively queer space, but to, you know, safely present queer stories in a more integrated way as well.
I was just going to say that I've been dancing now for 22 years, and you know, the last 5 and a bit of that has been professionally, and this is the first time in that time I've ever managed to, or been allowed to, do an exquisitely queer piece, which I think says a lot about what stories are being told, and yeah, what how many stories aren't being told. Like even when you're little kids and they put you in your first dance show, and I remember doing a piece that was supposed to be some sort of marriage thing, but half the little girls are dressed in little tuxedos and half the girls are dressed in little dresses, and like then you've got the mums that are sad because their girl's dressed as a boy, but then they also don't want 2 girls dressed as girls dancing together, and it's that like what does it matter more? It needs to be shown more. That's all I have to say. And the more communities and the more places you can reach and tell those stories, the better.
I think that's a really interesting point, actually, because it's about modeling, isn't it? And not just to other queer people, it's modeling to everyone. So I think it'd also be nice to do something with a wider group of people, not just queer people, but so if you had a piece, it would reflect, say, different segments of a locality, perhaps, or in Suffolk, I don't know. But there's that new Thorrington place. I haven't been there. Has anyone been there? The Thorrington Theatre, that outdoor space. They made it in a forest near Southwold. Has anyone else heard of it? No, the Thorrington. It's like in the round, and they've got proper lights and everything. But I've not been yet, so I don't know. But like summer, maybe. The beach.
Brilliant. I'm conscious of time. We're a few minutes over. Oh, someone's just said Spill Festival would be a good spot. I think their programme for this year has already gone out, but next year maybe. Oh, okay. Brilliant. Well, thank you for joining us. Like I said earlier, it's been lovely to spend National Coming Out Day with you all. Yeah, this has been recorded, so hopefully it will go far and wide, and we can encourage some more people to join the next project and share even more stories, and we can keep building on this wonderful project, even if we do say so ourselves. All right, so yeah, let's log off now. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming along, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.